Chapter 15. When the time came for the meeting in Hernia Heaven, Quillerin climbed to the third floor with some discomfort. His bad knee, although it had improved during the day, tightened up at nightfall, and he arrived at the meeting with a noticeable limp. The dealers sat in a circle, and Quillerin looked at their feet before he looked at their faces. They had tramped upstairs in their outdoor togs, and he saw velvet boots, a single brown suede teamed with a walking cast, some man-sized boots in immaculate white, and assorted rubbers and galoshes. He took the nearest vacant seat on a church pew with threadbare cushions, and found himself sitting between Clethra's cast and Russ Patch's crutches. "Looks like the bus stop for Lourdes," said the redhead, with a fraternal lean in Quillerin's direction. "What happened to you?" "I was felled by an avalanche. I wouldn't have struggled up all those stairs, one slogging foot at a time. Only I heard you were going to be here." She gave him a wink and a friendly nudge. "How did the picture taking go?" he asked. "That photographer you sent is a big hunk of man." "Did he break anything?" "Only a small Toby jug." "Newspapers always assign bulls to china shops," Quillerin explained. He was trying to see the soles of the footwear around him, but every pair of feet remained firmly planted on the floor. He turned to Russell Patch and said, "Good-looking boots you're wearing. Where did you manage to find white ones?" "Had to have them custom made," said the young man, stretching out his good leg for advantageous display. "Even the soles are white," Quillerin said, staring at the ridged bottoms and patting his mustache with satisfaction. "I suppose those crutches cramp your style when it comes to scrounging." "I still get around, and I won't have to use them much longer." "Get anything out of the Ellsworth house?" "No, I skipped that one. The kitchen cabinets were grabbed off before I could get there, and that's all I'm interested in." "They lie," Quillerin thought. "All these dealers lie. They're all actors, unable to tell reality from fantasy." Aloud, he said, "What do you do with kitchen cabinets?" "The real old ones make good built-ins for stereo installations if you give them a provincial finish. I've got a whole wall of them myself, with about $20,000 worth of electronic equipment, 36 speakers. You like music? I've got everything on tape. Operas, symphonies, chamber music, classic jazz." "You must have quite an investment there," Quillerin said, alerted to the apparent wealth of this young man. "Priceless. Come up and have a listen some night. I live right over my shop, you know." "Do you own the building?" "Well, it's like this. I rented it for a while and built in so many improvements, me and my roommate, that is, that I had to buy it to protect my investment." Quillerin forgot to pry any further, because Mary Duckworth arrived. Wearing a short blue plaid skirt, she sat on a kitchen chair of the Warren Harding period and crossed her long, elegant legs. For the first time, Quillerin saw her knees. He considered himself a connoisseur of knees, and these had all the correct points. They were slender, shapely, and eminently designed for their function, with the kind of vertical indentations on either side of the kneecap that caused a stir in the roots of his mustache. "My gosh, she's here," said a husky voice in his ear. "Keep her away from me, will you? She might try to break the other one." The redhead's ample bosom heaved with anger. "You know, she deliberately dropped a cast-iron garden urn on my foot." "Mary did?" "That woman," she said between clenched teeth, "is capable of anything. I wish she'd get out of Chunktown. Her shop doesn't belong here. That high-priced, pedigreed stuff spoils it for the rest of us." There was a sudden round of applause as Ben Nicholas, who had been acting as doorman down below, made a grandiose entrance in an admiral's cocked hat. And then the meeting began. Sylvia Katzenhide reviewed the plans for the block party on Wednesday. The city is going to rope off 4 blocks, she said, and decorate the utility poles with plastic angels. They've run out of Christmas angels, but they have some nice lavender ones left over from last Easter. Carol singers will be supplied by the Sanitation Department Glee Club. Quillerin said, "Could we keep the junkery open during the party? I hate to see Mrs. Cobb lose that extra business. I'd be willing to mind the store for a couple of hours myself." Clethra squeezed his arm and said, "You're a honey. We'll help too, my sisters and I. We'll take turns." Then someone suggested sending flowers to the Cobb funeral. And just as they were taking up a collection, they were stunned by a blast of noise from the floor below. It was a torrent of popular music, raucous, bouncy, loud. They listened in open-mouthed astonishment for a few seconds. Then all talked at once. "What's that? A radio? Who's down there? Nobody! Where's it coming from? Somebody's downstairs. Who could it be? How could they get in? The front door is locked, isn't it?" Quillerin was the first one on his feet. "Let's go down and see." He grabbed a wooden sledgehammer that was hanging on the wall and started down the narrow stairs, left foot first on each step. The only other men at the meeting followed, Russ on his crutches and Ben lumbering after them with a pitchfork in his hand. The noise was coming from the Cobb apartment. The door stood open. The apartment was in darkness. Quillerin reached in, groped for a wall switch, and flooded the room with light. "Who's there?" he shouted in a voice of authority. There was no answer. The music poured out of the small radio on the apothecary desk. The 3 men searched the apartment, Ben bringing up a delayed rear. "No one here," Quillerin announced. "Maybe it has an automatic timer," Russ said. "The thing doesn't have a timer," Quillerin said, as he turned off the offensive little radio. He frowned at the writing surface of the desk. Papers were scattered. A pencil cup was knocked over. From the floor, he picked up a telephone bill and an address book, and a gray feather. As the men emerged from the Cobb apartment, the women were beginning to venture down from the attic. "Is it safe?" they asked. Clethra said, "If it was a man, which way did he go?" "What was it? Does anyone know what it was?" "That crazy radio," Russ said. "It turned on all by itself." "How could it do that?" "I don't know," said Quillerin. "But he did." After the dealers had straggled out the front door, and Ben had departed for an evening at the Lion's Tail, Quillerin unlocked his apartment door and looked for the cats. Yum Yum was sitting on top of the refrigerator, with eyes bright and ears alert. Eyes and ears a trifle too large for her tiny, wedge-shaped face. Coco was lapping up a drink of water, his tail lying straight on the floor, as it did when he was especially thirsty. "Okay, Coco," said Quillerin. "How did you do it? Have you teamed up with Matilda?" The tip of Coco's tail tapped the floor lightly as he went on drinking. Quillerin wandered through his suite of rooms and speculated on each one. He knew Coco could turn a radio dial by scraping it with his hard little jaw. But how was this feline Houdini getting out of the apartment? Quillerin moved the swan bed away from the wall and looked for a vent in the baseboard. He examined the bathroom for trapdoors. Turn-of-the-century plumbers had been fond of trapdoors, but there was nothing of the sort. The kitchenette had a high transom window cut through to the hall, presumably for ventilation, and it would be easily accessible from the top of the refrigerator, but it was closed and latched. The telephone rang. "Quill," said Mary's pleasing voice, "are you doing anything about your knee? You looked as if you were in pain tonight." "I used cold compresses until the swelling went down." "What you need now is a heat lamp. May I offer you mine?" "I'd appreciate it," he said. "Yes, I'd appreciate it very much." In preparation for his session with the heat lamp, Quillerin put on a pair of sporty walking shorts that had survived a country weekend the previous summer, and admired himself in the long mirror on the dressing room door, at the same time pulling in his waistline and expanding his chest. He had always thought he would look admirable in Scottish kilts. His legs were straight, solid, muscular, and moderately logical. The puffiness around the left knee that had destroyed its perfection had now subsided, he was glad to note. He told the cats, "I'm having a guest, and I want you guys to use some discretion. No noisy squabbles. No flying around and disturbing the status quo." Coco squeezed his eyes and tilted his whiskers in what looked like a knowing smile. Yum Yum exhibited indifference by laundering the snow-white cowlick, where her fur grew in 2 directions on her breast. When Mary arrived carrying a basket, Coco looked her over from an unfriendly distance. "He's not overwhelmed with joy," she said, "but at least he's civil this time." "He'll get used to you," Quillerin assured her. In her basket, she had homemade fruitcake and an espresso maker, as well as a heat lamp. She plugged in the little silver coffee machine and positioned the infrared lamp over Quillerin's knee, and then sat in the twiggy rocker. Immediately, the country bumpkin of a rocking chair looked gracefully linear and organically elegant, and Quillerin wondered why he had ever thought it was ugly. "Do you have any idea what caused the outburst in the Cobb apartment?" she asked. "Just another of the cockeyed things that happen in this house. By the way, I wonder why Hollis Prance didn't attend the meeting." "Half the dealers stayed away. They probably knew we'd collect money for flowers." "Prance was here this afternoon, looking for some antique radios the Cobbs were supposed to be saving for him. Or so he said. Does that make sense?" "Oh, certainly. Dealers make most of their money by selling to each other. How does the heat feel? Is the lamp too close?" Soon, a rushing, bubbling roar in the kitchen announced that the espresso was ready. It alarmed Yum Yum, who ran in the opposite direction, but Coco made it his business to march into the kitchen and investigate. With a mixture of pride and apology, Quillerin said, "Coco's a self-assured fellow, but Yum Yum's as nervous as a cat. When in doubt, she exits. She's what you might call a pussycat's pussycat. She sits on laps and catches mice. All the things cats are supposed to do." "I've never owned a cat," Mary said, as she poured the coffee in small cups and added a twist of lemon peel. "But I used to study them for their grace of movement when I was dancing." "No one ever owns a cat," he corrected her. "You share a common habitation on a basis of equal rights and mutual respect, although somehow the cat always comes out ahead of the deal. Siamese particularly have a way of getting the upper hand." "Some animals are almost human. Please try this fruitcake, Quill." He accepted a dark, moist, mysterious, aromatic wedge of cake. Coco is more than human. He has a sixth sense. He seems to have access to information that a human couldn't collect without laborious investigation. Quillerin heard himself saying it, and he hoped it was still true. But deep in his heart, he was beginning to wonder. Mary turned to look at the remarkable animal. Coco was sitting on his spine, with one leg in midair, as he washed the base of his tail. He paused, with pink tongue extended, and returned her admiring gaze with an insolent stare. Then, having finished his ablutions, he went on to the ritual of sharpening his claws. He jumped on the daybed, stood on his hind legs, and scratched the papered wall where the book pages overlapped and corners were beginning to curl up tantalizingly. "No! Down! Scram! Beat it!" Quillerin scolded. Coco obeyed, but not until he had finished the sharpening job and taken his time about it. The man explained to his guest Coco was given a dictionary for a scratching pad, and now he thinks he can use any printed page for a pedicure. Sometimes I'm convinced he can read. He once exposed a series of art forgeries that way. Are you serious? Absolutely. Tell me, is there much fakery in antiques? Not in this country. An unscrupulous dealer may sell a 19th century Chippendale reproduction as an 18th century piece, or an artist may do crude paintings on old canvas and call them early American primitives, but there's no large-scale faking to my knowledge. How do you like the fruitcake? One of my customers made it. Robert Mouse. The attorney? Do you know him? He's a superb cook. Wasn't he Andy's lawyer? Quite an important attorney for a little operation in Junktown, Quillerin remarked. Robert is an avid collector and a friend of mine. He represented Andy as a courtesy. Did his legal mind ever do any questioning about Andy's so-called accident? Mary gave him an anxious glance. Are you still pursuing that? Quillerin decided to be candid. He was tired of hearing about Andy's superlative qualities from all the women in Junktown. Are you aware, he said, that it was Andy who tipped off the police to Cobb's scrounging? No, I can't believe. Why did he squeal on Cobb and not on Russ or some of the other scroungers? Did he have a grudge against Cobb? I don't. It may be that Andy also threatened Cobb, threatened to tell Iris about his philandering. I hate to say this, Mary, but your friend Andy was a meddler, or else he had an axe to grind. Perhaps he considered that Cobb was trespassing on his own territory when he visited Clethra. Mary flushed. So you found out about that, too? I'm sorry, said Quillerin. I didn't want to embarrass you. She shrugged, and she was attractive when she shrugged. I knew that Andy was seeing Clethra. That's why we quarreled the night he was killed. Andy and I weren't really committed. We had an understanding. Not even an understanding, just an arrangement. But I'm afraid I was beginning to feel possessive. She reached over and clicked off the heat lamp. That knee has boiled long enough. How does it feel? Better, much better. Quillerin started to fill his pipe. After Andy left her house that night to meet the prospective customers, what route did he take? He went out my back door, through the alley, and into the back of his shop. And when you followed, you went the same way? Did you see anyone else in the alley? Mary gave Quillerin a swift glance. I don't think so. There might have been one of those invisible men from the rooming house. They slink around like ghosts. How much time had elapsed when you followed Andy? She hesitated. Oh, about an hour? More fruitcake, Quill? Thanks. During that time, the customers may have come, found the front door locked, and gone away, unaware that Andy lay dead in the back room. Before they arrived, someone else could have followed Andy into the shop through the back door. Someone who had seen him enter. Let's see. How many buildings stand between your house and Andy's store? Russ's carriage house, then the variety store, then this house, then the rooming house where Ben has his shop. That building and your own place are duplicates of this house, aren't they? Quillerin asked. Only narrower. You're very observant. The 3 houses were built by the same family. I know Russ lives upstairs over his workshop. Who's his roommate? Is he in the antique business? No. Stanley is a hairdresser. I wonder where Russ gets all his dough. He owns the carriage house, wears custom-made boots, has $20,000 worth of sound equipment, stables a white Jaguar. Is he on the up and up? Did Andy think he was Simon Pure? Maybe Andy was getting ready to put the finger on him. Where does Russ get his dough? Does he have a sideline? I only know he's a hard worker. Sometimes I hear his power tools at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wonder. Quillerin stopped to light his pipe. I wonder why Russ lied to me tonight. I asked him if he'd been scrounging at the Ellsworth house, and he denied it. Yet, I could swear that those crutches and those white boots had been through that house. Dealers are sensitive about their sources of supply, Mary said. It's considered bad form to ask a dealer where he acquires his antiques, and if he answers you at all, he never feels bound to state the truth. It's also bad form to tell a dealer about your grandmother's attic treasures. Really? Who decrees these niceties of etiquette? Mary smiled in a lofty way that Quillerin found charming. The same authority who gives newspapers the right to invade everyone's privacy. Touché! Did I tell you about finding the $20 bill? She asked, after they had gazed at each other appreciatively for a few seconds. Some people get all the breaks, he said. Where did you find it? In the pocket of my sweater. The one I was wearing on the night of Andy's accident. The sweater dipped in his blood, and I rolled it up in a ball and stuffed it on a closet shelf. My cleaning woman found it this weekend, and that's when the $20 bill came to light. Where did it come from? I picked it up in Andy's workroom. You mean you found money at the scene of the accident, and you picked it up? Didn't you realize it might be an important clue? Mary shrugged and looked appealingly guilty. Banker's child, she explained. Was it folded? She nodded. How was it folded? Lengthwise, and then in half. Did Andy fold his money that way? No. He used a billfold. Quillerin turned his head suddenly. Coco, get away from that lamp. The cat had crept onto the table and was rubbing his jaw against the wick regulator of the lamp decorated with pink roses. At the same moment, Quillerin felt a flicker of awareness in the same old place, and he smoothed his mustache with the stem of his pipe. Mary, he said, who were the people who were coming to look at the light fixture? I don't know. Andy merely said a woman from the suburbs was bringing her husband to approve it before they bought it. Quillerin leaned forward in his Morris chair. Mary, if Andy was getting the chandelier down from the ceiling when he fell, it means that the customers had already okayed it. If Andy was getting the thing down so they could take it with them, don't you see? If the accident was genuine, it means the suburban couple were in the store when it happened. Why didn't they call the police? Who were they? Were they there at all? And if not, who was there? Mary looked guilty again. I guess it's all right to tell you. Now, when I went to Andy's shop to apologize, I went twice. The first time I peeked in and saw him talking with someone, so I made a hasty retreat and tried again later. Did you recognize the person? Yes, but I was afraid to let anyone know I had seen anything. What did you see, Mary? I saw them arguing, Andy and Cece, and I was afraid Cece might have seen me. You have no idea how relieved I was when I heard about his accident this morning. That's a terrible thing to say, I know. And you've been living in fear of that guy. Did he give you any reason to be? Not actually, but that's when the mysterious phone calls started. I knew it, Quillerin said. I knew there was something fishy about that call the other night. How often? About once a week. Always the same voice. Obviously disguised. It sounded like a stage whisper. Raspy. Asthmatic. What was said? Always something stupid and melodramatic. Vague hints about Andy's death. Vague predictions of danger. Now that Cece is gone, I have a feeling the calls will stop. Don't be too sure, Quillerin said. There was a third person in Andy's shop that night. The owner of that $20 bill. Cece used a billfold and filed his currency flat. Someone else. I wonder how Ben Nicholas folds his money. Quill! Would a woman ever fold a bill lengthwise? Quill, she said earnestly. You're not serious about this, are you? I don't want any official interest to be revived in Andy's death. She said it bluntly and confronted him squarely. Why do you say that? Her eyes wavered. Suppose you continued to investigate, and suppose you found an answer that pointed to murder. You would report it, wouldn't you? Of course. And there would be a trial. Quillerin nodded. And because I found the body, I would have to testify, wouldn't I? And then my position would be exposed. She slid out of the rocking chair and knelt on the floor at his side. Quill, that would be the end of everything I live for. The publicity, my father. You know what would happen. He put aside his pipe, and it fell on the floor. He studied her face. It's the newspapers I'm afraid of, she said. You know how they are about names, anything for a name. Leave matters the way they are, she begged. Andy's gone. Nothing will bring him back. Don't make any more inquiries. Quill, please. She reached for his hands and stared at him with eyes wide and pleading. Please, do it for me. She bent her head and rubbed her smooth cheek against the back of his hand. And Quillerin quickly raised her face to his. Please, Quill, tell me you'll drop the whole matter. Mary, I don't. Quill, please, promise. Her lips were very close. There was a breathless moment. Time stood still. Then they heard then a hissing. Woof! Coco! Shouted the man. Ack, 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 ack! Yum, yum! Grrr! Coco, quit that!